A Mark Cross handbag once sat on the arm of Grace Kelly in one of the most famous films ever made. At its peak, that brand was a name wealthy American women carried the way they carry Hermes today. Right now, you can find original Mark Cross bags selling for less than the cost of a department store raincoat because the brand that made them effectively flatlined came back as a ghost of itself and almost nobody noticed it happened. That is what this is about. Not brands that got cheaper. Brands that died. Some went bankrupt. Some got bought and quietly gutted. Some are technically still selling bags today. Except the company that made them great no longer exists in any real sense. The name was sold off, slapped onto licensed product, and kept on life support. 8 of them. And the strange part is how little noise these deaths made, considering how big some of these names once were. This channel follows the money and the materials, not the marketing. No brand deals, no sponsorships, just what actually happened. If that is useful to you, subscribe before we get into it, because the pattern that killed these 8 brands is still killing brands right now. Number 8. Etienne Aigner. If you shopped for a nice leather bag in the 1970s or 1980s, you knew the name Aigner, and you knew the little horseshoe-shaped A logo stamped into the leather. The brand built its reputation on a very specific thing. Rich, equestrian-inspired leather goods in a signature oxblood burgundy made with genuine full-grain leather. Full grain just means the top layer of the hide with nothing sanded off. The strongest, longest-lasting part of the leather, the part that develops a patina instead of cracking. Aigner bags were the real thing. Here is what happened. The American Aigner business and the original German Etienne Aigner house split into separate operations. And the American side leaned harder and harder into licensing. Licensing is when a company stops making its own product and instead rents its name to outside manufacturers. It is fast money. It is also brand suicide in slow motion because the company loses control of quality and the bag with the famous logo is now made by someone whose only job is to hit a price point. The Aigner name ended up on belts, on shoes, on bags, scattered across discount department stores and outlet racks. The oxblood magic faded into just another tan handbag in a clearance bin. The brand simply became wallpaper, and that is the first lesson here, because licensing sprawl is one of the clearest warning signs that a brand is dying even while it is still on the shelf. The next brand did it with crystal and red carpets, which made the fall a lot harder to watch. Number 7. Judith Leiber. Judith Leiber made the kind of bag you have seen even if you do not know the name, the tiny, jewel-encrusted evening minaudière shaped like animals, fruits, slices of cake. At their height, a single Leiber minaudière sold for somewhere between $2,000 and $6,000, and they appeared on the arms of first ladies and Hollywood actresses. The woman behind them was a genuine master craftsman. Then the brand left the founder's hands. Judith Leiber sold the company in 1993, and it changed ownership more than once. New owners start asking how to make the name generate more money faster. The answer, almost always, is licensing and diffusion, cheaper sunglasses, fragrances, lower-cost product. To be fair, Leiber crystal bags are still produced, but the company as Judith Leiber built it, a true atelier run by a master, that company died when she walked away. Loss of the founder is the second warning sign. A brand can keep the logo and the price tag long after it has lost the only person who knew why those things were worth anything. Number 6. Dooney Bourke. In the 1980s and early 1990s, Dooney Bourke made one of the most respected leather bags in America, the all-weather leather collection. These were bags built to survive decades of daily use. They were compared, without irony, to women who carried Louis Vuitton and even Hermes. The leather genuinely was that good. Then, Dooney chased a younger crowd. In the early 2000s, the company rolled out the It bag, a line plastered in colorful logos, aimed squarely at teenagers and preteens. It sold over $100 million worth. Commercially, it worked, but it quietly rewired what the name meant. Durable craftsmanship started showing up on cheap canvas. To be honest, it is still a functioning company. It did not technically go bankrupt. But the brand that made bags rivaling Hermes leather, that brand is gone. It's now an affordable mall label. When the past version of a brand outperforms the current one on the resale market, that brand has died in every way except the legal one. You have to read it off the product itself. Test 1. Check who actually makes it. Look for where the bag is manufactured and whether the company still controls its own production. A heritage brand that has quietly moved to pure licensing, renting its name to outside manufacturers, is a brand that has stopped caring about the bag and started caring only about the logo. Test 2. Feel the leather. Full grain springs back and shows natural texture. Cheap coated leather feels like firm plastic. A dying brand almost always downgrades its leather first. Test 3. Look at the resale numbers. This is the most honest signal. If a bag that cost $1,000 new resells for $80, the market has declared the brand dead. Test 4. Count the owners. A brand passed between private equity firms has usually been hollowed out. Every sale is a chance for the new owner to cut the leather grade. Number 5. Liz Claiborne. In the 1980s and 90s, this was an accessible luxury empire. It was the rare brand that felt aspirational and attainable at the same time. What killed Liz Claiborne is the most modern death on this list. The company did not so much collapse as dissolve into licensing and rebranding. The common verdict among those who knew it was that people were tired of Loewe being that old leather brand. It had a glorious past and an invisible present. By 2013, it was a forgotten arm of a giant conglomerate, coasting on a legacy customers had stopped caring about. What revived it is the exact opposite of what killed every other brand on this list, and that is the whole lesson. In 2013, LVMH handed creative control to Jonathan Anderson, a young designer who poured resources, fresh ideas, and obsessive craftsmanship into the house, and crucially, doubled down on the leather work rather than cheapening it. He introduced the puzzle bag in 2014 and the hammock after it, made the brand culturally relevant to an entirely new generation, and turned Loewe into the hottest brand in the world, topping the industry's heat rankings repeatedly in 2023 and 2024. The old Loewe died of neglect. The new one was reborn through investment in craft, not the gutting of it. So Loewe is on this list as the brand that died and was resurrected the right way, which makes it the perfect mirror for all 7 names before it. Aigner and Leiber and Dooney were hollowed out by licensing and logos. Mulberry priced away its own people. Mark Cross and Falchi lost the souls who built them. Every one of those is a brand that took its heritage for granted and let the money men strip it for parts. Loewe is the proof that it does not have to end that way, that an old, dead leather brand can come roaring back, but only when someone invests in the craftsmanship instead of cashing out the name. The difference between a brand that dies and one that rises is, almost every single time, exactly that choice, which leaves the most useful question of all. If these are the brands that died, where did all that demand go? And which names are quietly doing right now what Loewe did, building real quality while the dying giants coast on reputation? That is where your money should actually be looking. First, the loose thread from earlier, now nailed down precisely, because it is the cleanest example of a brand death on this entire list. The Liz Claiborne corporate unwinding went exactly like this. In October 2011, the company sold its founding Liz Claiborne namesake brand to J.C. Penney for roughly $267 to $288 million. Then, on May 15, 2012, the corporation formally renamed itself from Liz Claiborne, Incorporated to Fifth and Pacific Companies, keeping Juicy Couture, Kate Spade, and Lucky Brand. Then it sold off Juicy Couture and Lucky Brand too, and on February 25, 2014, renamed itself one final time to Kate Spade and Company. The company that was Liz Claiborne sold its own founder's name, then erased that name from itself twice over. That is a brand death with a paper trail, and it is the perfect bridge to the real question. Because here is what every single one of these 8 stories has in common. The demand never disappeared. Women still want beautifully made leather bags at a fair price. When Aigner and Dooney and Liz Claiborne hollowed out, those customers did not stop shopping. They went somewhere else. So where did the money go? And which brands are quietly doing right now exactly what saved Loewe? Building real quality instead of cashing out a name. A few patterns are worth watching, and I want to be clear these are observations about brand strategy, not buy this now advice. The first is the new wave of direct-to-consumer leather brands that skipped the department store and licensing trap entirely. Names like Polène, the French label selling genuinely well-constructed structured leather bags in the few $100 range, or Strathberry, the Scottish brand that earned its moment when the Princess of Wales and Meghan Markle carried it. occupy precisely the accessible luxury space that Dooney and Aigner abandoned. They sell mostly online, control their own production, and have not licensed their logo onto 100 discount products. Whether they stay disciplined is the open question, but the strategy is the opposite of what killed this list. The second pattern is the heritage house that did a Loewe, taking an old name and reviving it through craft and a strong creative vision rather than gutting it for licensing fees. That is the model that actually works. And it is worth learning to recognize the difference between a real revival and a name-only relaunch. A genuine revival reinvests in materials and makers. A fake one slaps the old logo on cheaper goods and hopes you remember the name fondly enough not to look closely. And the third pattern is the most boring and the most reliable. The brands that simply never let go of the thing that made them valuable. The reason names like Hermes are used as the measuring stick in every one of these stories is not magic. It is that they never diluted, never licensed their core leather goods into oblivion, never chased a quick younger market cash grab at the expense of the customer who actually loved them. The lesson of the dead is written in the survivor. So here is the single test that ties all 8 deaths together, the one thing to carry out of this video. Before you spend real money on any heritage handbag, ask one question. Is this brand still investing in the craft or just selling the memory of it? Check the leather grade with your own hands. Check who actually owns and manufactures it now. Check what the resale market says, because resale buyers cannot be lied to. And check whether the vintage version of the brand outsells the current one, because if the past beats the present, the brand already died and just has not told you. Every name on this list failed that test. The survivors pass it, and the final verdict is now delivered. That is the real story nobody tells you. These brands did not die because leather went out of style or because their customers vanished. They died because the people who owned them decided the name was worth more stripped for parts than kept alive. And they were quietly right for a while, until the bags stopped being worth carrying and the customers walked to someone who still cared. Now I want to hear from you, because this one is genuinely debatable. Which of these 8 do you think actually died, and which are just sleeping? Is Mulberry finished, or about to come roaring back? Did Mark Cross really return, or is the revival just borrowing a dead brand's name? Drop your verdict in the comments and tell me which forgotten brand you think deserves its own video next, because there are more of these than anyone realizes. If this changed how you will look at the next luxury bag you are tempted by, subscribe, because breaking down what your money is actually buying is the entire point of this channel. I will see you in the next one. Over time, the corporation accumulated and shed brands, struggled against changing retail, and eventually made a stunning decision. It sold off its own founding namesake brand and renamed the entire corporation, pivoting away from the very name it was built on. What is certain and well documented is that the Liz Claiborne namesake label was sold off, scattered into licensing deals, and reduced to a name that appears on whatever a licensee decides to put it on, while the original company pivoted entirely away from it. The lesson sits right on top of Test 4. When a corporation is willing to sell off the very name it was founded on, you are watching the purest version of a brand death. The people who own it have decided the name is worth more as a licensing asset than as a real product line. The clothes and bags with Liz Claiborne on them did not stop existing. They just stopped being made by anyone who cared what the name once stood for. A great American brand became a tag for hire. An empire that dressed a generation of working women got carved up and licensed out, and most of the people who once wore it never even noticed the company behind it was already gone. The brands left on this list did not die in a boardroom. The next one was buried by its own logo. Number 4, Carlos Falchi. In the 1980s, if you wanted a handbag that looked like nothing else on anyone's arm, you wanted a Carlos Falchi. He was a Brazilian-born, self-taught artisan who got his start in 1970s Greenwich Village hand-stitching leather clothing for Mick Jagger, Miles Davis, Tina Turner, and Patti Smith, dyeing the skins himself in his apartment bathtub. That is not a marketing legend. That is literally how the brand began. He moved into handbags, and in 1980 his slouchy, unstructured buffalo bag became such a phenomenon that Women's Wear Daily called it the most copied bag in the industry. What made a Falchi special was real. His bags used genuine exotic skins, python, alligator, ostrich, buffalo, assembled into soft patchwork designs that he often hand-painted himself. His main collection sold in upscale department stores like Saks and Bloomingdale's for roughly $1,500 to $5,000, and his clients ranged from Jacqueline Kennedy Onassis to Rihanna. He won the industry's Coty Award in 1986. A piece of his work sits in the permanent collection of the Metropolitan Museum of Art. This was a serious craftsman, and the business he built moved around $100 million a year at its height. Here is how it ended, and it is a quiet, sad version of a brand death. Falchi struggled financially in the 1990s, and the company actually closed once in 1997 before being revived. In the years before he died, he started selling much cheaper versions of his bags on the home shopping network, some priced as low as $20 to $300, and did a limited line for Target. Then, in March 2015, Carlos Falchi died of brain cancer at age 70. And when the artisan whose own hands defined the product is gone, the question becomes what is left. The answer came fast. The brand was relaunched in 2016 by a licensee, and the new Carlos Falchi bags were entirely vegan, no exotic skins at all, retailing between roughly $78 and $198. Sit with that for a second because it is the entire theme of this video in one brand. The whole point of a Carlos Falchi bag was hand-assembled exotic skin, dyed and painted by a master craftsman. The relaunched version removed the exotic skins, removed the master, and kept the signature. It is not a scandal. Vegan materials are a legitimate choice, and the price is honest about what you are getting. But it is no longer the thing that made the name mean anything. The craft died with the craftsman, and what carries his signature now is a different product entirely. The vintage bags he actually touched still trade among collectors precisely because buyers know the difference between the man's work and a logo on a budget bag. The next brand proves that even an extra century of history cannot protect a name once the people who care about it walk away. Number 3. Mark Cross. Remember the bag from the opening, the one Grace Kelly carried? This is its brand, and its story is the oldest and in some ways the most stunning on this list. Mark Cross was founded in Boston in 1845. That is not a typo. 1845, which makes it older than Louis Vuitton's founding and roughly contemporary with the very beginnings of the European houses we treat as eternal. It started, like Hermes and Gucci, making saddles, bridles, and harnesses for the horse and buggy era, then grew into one of America's first true luxury leather houses. It was so respected that people called it the American Hermes, and the comparison was earned. The leather goods were originally made in Italy to a standard that genuinely rivaled the European elite. Its most famous moment came in 1954 when Gerald Murphy, the company's president and a friend of Alfred Hitchcock, designed the overnight case that Grace Kelly carries in Rear Window, one of the earliest examples of product placement in film history. The bag was so beloved that demand for that silhouette ran for the next 30 years, and the brand's modern best-selling line, the Grace bag, is named after her to this day. For most of the 20th century, Mark Cross was a name wealthy Americans simply knew, the way they knew Tiffany. And then it died, completely, with the lights turned off by a pastry company. By the 1990s, the look had gone stale, and sales had slumped against fierce competition. The brand's owner at the time was Sara Lee, yes, the food conglomerate, which also happened to own Coach back then. Sara Lee shut Mark Cross down entirely by the end of the decade. A 172-year-old American luxury house, the maker of one of the most famous bags in cinema, simply ceased to exist. It sat dead for roughly 2 decades. The only reason the name survives at all is that a longtime fan and former investor Neil Fox resurrected it in 2010 and 2011, smartly going back to the same northern Italian factories that made the originals, so the revived bags are actually well made. But here is the honest verdict, and it carries the warning at the heart of this entire list. The Mark Cross you can buy today is a careful, genuine revival, a good one, with real Italian construction and quality calfskin. It is not a cheap licensing cash grab like some others here, and that deserves credit. Yet, it is still a resurrection, not an unbroken line. There is a roughly 20-year hole in the middle where the company was simply dead, the institutional knowledge scattered, the original era over. A brand can come back. The exact thing it was the first time usually does not. And that gap between the legend and the relaunch is exactly where buyers get confused about what they are actually paying for. The last two brands are the biggest names left, and one of them is a fall that is still happening right now in real time, while everyone argues about whether it counts. Number 2. Mulberry. This one is different from everything before it, because Mulberry did not fade in the 1990s or get quietly licensed into a discount bin. Mulberry's decline is happening right now in real time, and the cause of death is one of the most instructive mistakes in modern luxury. Around 2012, Mulberry was on the absolute cusp of greatness. The British brand had genuine it bag moments, a style named after model Alexa Chung, sightings on stars like Lana Del Rey. And for a moment it looked poised to become a true global luxury house, the British answer to the French and Italian giants. It was widely thought of as something close to a British Hermès in waiting, built on solid English leather craftsmanship and beloved classics like the Bayswater. The trajectory was straight up. Then Mulberry made the decision that broke it. Believing it could leap into the top tier of luxury, the brand sharply raised its prices, pushing its bags up toward genuine high luxury territory and away from the accessible luxury price point that had built its following. The current chief executive, brought in years later to clean up the mess, described that era with unusual bluntness, saying the company lost its mind when it increased prices. That is not an outside critic. That is Mulberry's own CEO. The price hike did not elevate the brand. It stranded it, too expensive for the loyal customers who loved it, not prestigious enough to compete with the houses it was suddenly priced against. The customers it had spent years building simply left, and the numbers since have been brutal and specific. In the first half of its 2024 financial year, Mulberry's revenue fell 19% to around £56 million, and its pre-tax loss widened to roughly £15.7 million, up from £12.8 million the year before. Full-year revenue for the 2025 financial year dropped to about £120 million, a 21% decline. The company cut around a quarter of its head office jobs, closed stores, and had to raise emergency cash. The retail tycoon Mike Ashley's Fraser's Group circled with takeover bids, which the board rejected, but the very fact that a brand once compared to Hermès was fending off a discount retail predator tells you how far the fall went. Now, in fairness, Mulberry is not legally dead. It is fighting hard to come back, repositioning itself deliberately as entry to luxury, with most bags now priced around $1,200, refocusing on its British identity and its core customer. It may well survive, and parts of that plan are smart. But the brand that in 2012 looked like Britain's next great luxury house, that version is dead, killed by its own ambition. Mulberry reached for the top tier, missed, and fell through the floor it had been standing on. It is the clearest proof on this list that a brand does not need bad leather or cynical licensing to die. Sometimes it just needs to forget who its customer is, which makes the final brand the strangest case of all, because it is the one that actually died and then came back to become the hottest name in the entire industry. Number 1. Loewe. If you follow fashion at all right now, this name probably stops you because Loewe is arguably the buzziest luxury brand on earth at this moment. So how does it top a list of brands that died? Because the Loewe almost everyone discovered in the last few years is not the Loewe that existed before. The old one effectively flatlined into irrelevance, and almost nobody outside Spain noticed because hardly anyone was paying attention to it at all. That is its own kind of death. The history is staggering. Loewe was founded in Madrid in 1846, making it one of the oldest luxury houses in the entire world, older than almost every French and Italian name we worship. It built its reputation on genuinely exceptional Spanish leather craftsmanship, served actual Spanish royalty, and held the royal warrant from the early 1900s. This was a heritage leather house with as much right to greatness as anyone. LVMH bought it in 1996, and then, despite that ownership and that history, Loewe spent years as a quiet, stagnating, slightly stale brand that the wider fashion world simply did not care about.